Hey,
Hey,
Eric,
Awesome,
we're
I think
about
you
to
could
start.
mute yourself when you're not
Um,
talking.
Okay, okay.
Thank
just
you. Yeah,
getting
there's some
everything
noise there.
squared
Thanks.
away. So just bear with us. If you got any questions, feel free to ask in chat. Hey, Eric, you want to start sharing one of your slides? Just so I can set up the last part of this.
How about the opener?
Fantastic.
So if I move that there and present. How do I get it to not show the cheaters view? I'll just share the others. No. You know how sometimes when you have two monitors hooked up, it'll show like the slideshow on one and then the like your next one and your notes on the other. You know how to turn that off? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how. I think if you just share the PowerPoint application, it shows.
Oh, okay.
It shows just the screen. It doesn't show like the notes.
Okay, so now what do you see?
So, yeah, I see just your screen. Like just the getting started with Azure DevOps, not the what's coming next or your notes.
Boom. All right. Crushing it.
Okay, let me go check this. Cool. I think this should do it.
Oh, it's time for us to start. You want me to go and do that?
Yeah, if you want to, I am good to go on my end.
You're good on your end?
Yep.
Okay.
And we're in the midst of significant sort of mini revolution.
All right, we're about to start. If you've got your audio, your microphone on, it'd be probably be best if you muted it.
This rumored move proves to be is as much today as on election day. Trump, just as Reagan defined the GOP.
There we go. Cool. All right, let's officially get started. Hey, welcome to the North Dallas Developer Group. Today we're going to talk about Azure DevOps, and this is like a 101 level talk. So this is very beginner. I'm going to walk you through creating a basic project, putting something in Azure, setting up some a lame unit test, but one that'll at least test the pipeline and all that. So this is a beginner level talk to Azure DevOps. Who am I? I am Eric. I am a principal consultant at Improving. This just happened about a month ago. My main job at the moment is teaching, and so I'm going to be instructing probably for the most of the rest of this year is what I'm hoping, and so that's pretty awesome. Very excited about that. I'm getting an echo. Sweet, not anymore. All right, if you want to follow me on Twitter, at Maliok, I don't tweet much about Azure DevOps. So if you want Azure DevOps goodies, this is not the Twitter account for you. I mostly tweet about books, Latin, Greek, and sometimes technology. Then I have my website, and I will also blog there about similar things. Occasionally, you might see something about Azure DevOps, but this is not your prime source for things. Caveat before we get going, I am not an Azure DevOps expert. I'm a user these days, but you know what? I'm just not an expert at this stuff. And so if you want all the details, I've actually got a better place for you to look. Let me show you. All right, I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. If I can figure out how. There it is. Switching to my main screen. All right. Can you see my screen now? My other screen? Russell, can you give me a thumbs up? Sweet. All right, cool. We actually had about a year ago another meeting on Azure DevOps. And if you want a general discussion of DevOps and a more advanced discussion of DevOps, this is actually a much better talk to listen to. This is a one-on-one, 101, hands-on, I'm going to walk you through things kind of talk. His is higher level, and I would definitely recommend going and watching that if you're looking for, meatier Azure DevOps stuff. This is a very different kind of talk than that. Also, before we jump in, I want to talk a little bit about this website. Zeal has sponsored us a number of times. They're a local consulting company. They made us a new website. They did this thing all by themselves, and we have this new website. I'm sure you noticed it if you came and RSVP'd. So big thanks to Zeal for doing this. We really appreciate them for the sponsorship they've done in the past, and of course for this. All right, let's get started. So I've got Slack open, but I don't see the chat for Zoom. So if anyone has questions, put your questions in the general channel in Slack, or I'm going to depend on my muchachos to watch the chat in Zoom and let me know if there's any questions there. And so if you have questions during the discussion, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask those questions. I don't mind being disturbed. I don't mind being interrupted. It's totally fine. So feel free to do that at any point, or just if you want to ask a question and it's not too urgent, just put it in either the general channel in Slack or in Zoom. All right. Cool. Sweet. Thank you, Russell. Oh, I think I do have chat here. Sweet. All right, well, let's get started. So what is Azure DevOps? If you know anything about DevOps, the basic idea of DevOps is you've got your code, all right? You've got this thing, and then you've got an environment that it runs in production, all right? You've got your website that's your code, and you've got your website that's running on a server that everybody can hit. DevOps is sort of that space between getting your code all the way out to the website, but you probably all know that since you're here. Azure DevOps is a tool, and it looks something like this. Azure DevOps is something created by Microsoft. I'm not generally speaking a DevOps kind of guy. Actually, using Azure DevOps is my first foray into the DevOps world, I think. And so it's been an interesting experience, and I thought I would share some things with you guys. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to create a brand new MVC project. We're going to get it into the Azure DevOps source control, though you can use GitHub or something like that. That's not a problem. We're going to create work items for me to work on. We're going to create dashboards so we can see how things are going. We're going to deploy things. We're going to run unit tests, all that kind of stuff. We're just going to walk through it. And like I said, anytime during this, if you want to, please ask a question. I'll stop, and if I don't know the answer, I will tell you I don't know the answer. What's that? That is an echo. Yeah, if you are not speaking, will you please mute yourself? Thank you. All right, well, let's actually get started. So let's start with the project. So I've got some things open. I've got Explorer open. I've got PowerShell open. I've got a browser open, which is where we're going to do things in terms of Azure DevOps. Let's open up Visual Studio. So let's create a new project. And this is what we're going to deploy. We'll create a web app. Somebody give me a noun, a word, anybody. Put it in chat somewhere. And that's what we're going to call this application. Or say it. What? Dog money. All right. Thank you, Justin. All right, so where is this going to go? I'm going to put this where I put my codes. I'm going to have this little folder here. This is trash, not because what we're doing is trash, but because this is going to go away as soon as we're done. All right, so I'm going to create a project called Dog Money right here. And let's get going. It's going to be a .NET 5 app. It's not going to have authentication. It's really just going to be a very basic kind of app. Let's make sure it runs. It should. I am absolutely a security risk. Here we go. All right, so here's our app, which is called Dog Money. We're going to get this thing deployed. So let's go to Azure DevOps and spend some time there. Okay. Whenever you are going to do something in Azure DevOps, you create what is called a project, Dog Money. We'll create this as a private project because people will think I'm really weird if they see it, if I create it as a public project. And I am weird, but that's okay. So this is the Azure DevOps website. And so you've got a few different sections. In the overview, you've got dashboards, which we will mess with. In boards, this is basically the work item management kind of stuff. This is where you can do sprints and Kanban boards and things like that. That's that general area. Russell and Justin, I'm going to depend on you, I think, to mute people that come in with their mics on, if you don't mind. All right, so that's what boards is. So overview is has dashboards. That's also all we're going to use there. Boards will be for project management type stuff. Repos is essentially Git repos, though you can do other things. Pipelines is what you'll set up for builds, and we will mess around with all of these so far. There is a way to set up test plans, which I'm not going to do tonight, and there's a way to capture artifacts. I'm not going to do that either. And so we're going to see the dashboards, the work item management, the repositories, and we're going to see the pipelines. Let's start by going boards. And knowing that we're going to boards, we can remind ourselves that Microsoft is not good at naming things. But still, we're in boards, and I'm going to create myself a new work item. So I'm going to say set up MVC project. And actually, I just created that. So we'll put that as a done. All right. What are some other things that we're going to do tonight? Well, we're going to store or put that project in source control. What else are we going to do? We are going to deploy. My finger's in the wrong place. And by the way, I am on a new Windows machine, and so my fingers are very confused about how to type at this point. That's my excuse. And then once we get it deployed to Azure, what we're going to do is we're going to come back and then put a unit test project in there and get that working within the flow, then fail the test, see the build fail, get it fixed again, see it succeed. And show that kind of flow. So set up unit test. This is basically what we're going to do, and we'll be showing you various things as we go through, as we go through this process, various pieces of Azure DevOps to give you an introduction to how this thing works. All right, so we've created our project. We've now set us up some items. Let's go set up a repo, because we've already set up our project. And so let's see, put that project in source control. We'll put that in doing. So go to repos. It's about as easy as it is to set up a repo in GitHub. So I've got this here. It's already ready to go. Let's get the code ready for that. First thing I want is a .NET Core git ignore. So I guess it's not entirely appropriate to call it .NET Core anymore, but habits die hard. Back to Visual Studio. So we have our solution. Let's go to the solution and add an item. There it is.
We did have a question, Eric.
Yeah, what's that?
Somebody asked about the CLI variants for the commands you're running.
And so generally speaking, if you want to create a web app, it's going to be something like .NET new MVC, like would create a new MVC app. I think this will give us all the options. And so what we actually created, let's find this here. This is actually going to be a .NET new web app, and because this actually, I believe, created the Razor Pages variant of it, which for those who are old web forms fans, has that a little bit of that kind of feel to it. And so .NET new web app should basically create what we just created. It won't create the solution file though. That's a separate. Yeah. But everything we're doing here can be done with on the command line. It just takes a little bit longer, but it's certainly something to do. Yes. Ooh. All right, let me see if I can figure out how to do that. I'm gonna stop share for a second. Okay, which one of you wants to be host?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Either one.
Okay. Russell, you are now host. No problem. I can still share too. Fantastic. All right, I believe there was another question. What was Amir asking? I believe it was from him.
More CLI commands for the Azure side. I'll point to the docs.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I actually don't interact with Azure much from CLI these days. And by these days, I don't mean I used to. It's just I haven't gotten into it. So these days was definitely not the right way of saying that. Okay. So assuming there's no more questions. So we're in dog money now. We need to create a Git repository, Git status. There's our stuff. All right, so our stuff is now committed in our local repository. Let's go ahead and push this up to Azure DevOps. So we don't need this anymore. Copy this, paste. And I have the PowerShell prompt open. I'm actually not going to be doing any PowerShell tonight. This is just the prompt I happen to be using. Okay, so let's see. Boom. All right, so now we have our code up here. So we've created our project. We set up some work items. We've set up our repo. We've actually got our code here now. Let's go back to our boards. here we are, put that project in source control. Hey, that's done. Before we do that, what I want to do is I want to show you the dashboards. And so we can come here if we want to see what's going on with the board, of course. But let's take a look at dashboards. Dashboards are just a way of essentially having a central place for some widgets so you can see certain things. And so I'm going to add some stuff like assign to me, which I've not assigned anything to myself yet. Let's just start with that one for now. And so done editing, it says work assigned to Eric Sowell. Well, there's none there. So if we go back to boards and we do the right thing and we say something like, okay, unassigned. Now it's not unassigned, and let's go ahead and do all of these to me. Now, if we go back to look at the dashboard, I would expect that we'll see that is updated. All right, so that's one dashboard item. Later on, we'll create a query for open tickets. We'll create a query for build status, things like that. We'll try that out here in a minute. So here's dashboards. Not a big deal. It's really just visualization of stuff that's going on elsewhere. All right, so now that we've got that done, we can go, because it says it now has 3 issues here. We can go to boards. We can mark this as done. Now, if I go back to my dashboard, I can see that we're now down to 2. So this dashboard is obviously keeping up with things. All right, now let's go spend a little bit more time in the work item section. So you can look at work items in different ways. This is just a different view of the work items. Boards is something we've already looked at. If you want to create, specialized visualizations in the dashboards, what you have to do is you have to go here and you have to create queries. And so let's do that. And so I can create a query and say something like this. It starts off with this default saying, okay, work item type, what type am I looking for? Well, right now, all I have is the one type. And so I'm just going to leave that open. And what about state? What I'm going to do is I'm going to say not closed. No, that's active. Not closed. So this gives me a basic query. This should show, I would assume, well, not closed. I should say not done. There we go. So this will just give me the 2 that I've got done. And so now that I've run it, I can now save it and I can say not done issues, or what other name I want to give it. Put this in my shared queries. And now I'm going to create another query. All right, new query. And now I want to do one of those that are, in fact, done. Run query. So those are 2 separate ones. Save this. Completed issues. Okay, so I've got 2 different queries that are now saved here, and I put them in the shared section so that whenever I go back to dashboard, I can use them. So, like I said earlier, dashboards, as you would know, are all about the visualization. So let's create a visualization. And so assign to me is just one that comes out of the box. You don't even have to do anything because it just looks and sees who you are. What I want to do is look at the query. So if you pull on a query tile, you can come in here and then you can hit the configure button. And at that point, you get to run the queries that we just created. So if we say completed issues, and we can set our color, super fancy. And let's do another one. All right, there we go. And that one was completed. This one is going to be the ones that are not done. And let's make those red and scary. All right, so now we have our dashboard. It's got the work items assigned to me, which is, of course, all of them, because I'm the only developer on this project. We've got 2 completed items, and we've got 2 items that are not yet done. And so this is the kind of stuff you see in the dashboard. So what's our next step? So we've got our stuff in source control. We've set up a basic dashboard. We've set some work items up. What we haven't done is we haven't actually tried to deploy this thing yet. And what's the point of doing any DevOps if you're not deploying anything? So let's go ahead and get that all set up. What you do to deploy things, generally speaking, through this tool is you're going to go through pipelines. And we're going to create a pipeline. And so we're going to hit that button. If we go to Azure Repos and we pick dog money, what you can do at this point is you can pick one of these and it will give you like a sample Azure pipelines file for you to use. All right. I've actually got one that's already set up for everything I need. So I'm actually not going to use this Azure pipelines, YAML that it's giving me. What I want to do is go get that and go get the one I have and put it in the project, and then we will talk through it. So if we go to Solution Explorer, I'm going to create a new file here at the root. Now, if you go back and listen to that video that was done about a year ago, Jeffrey said he doesn't use the YAML pipelines yet because they don't do everything, and I'm pretty sure they still don't. They've worked pretty fine for what I've done now, but there are still some things you do have to use the UI for. So your mileage may vary depending on what you're ultimately trying to do with them. And so here is the YAML pipeline. And here's what it does top to bottom. We set up a trigger on the main branch in our repo. And so anytime code changes in the main branch, the build's going to rerun. We're going to be doing this on Windows. This just sets up some variables. Now, the way the pipelines work is they're broken up into tasks. And so you do this, you do that, and so forth to walk yourself through ultimately the pipeline of what's going to happen. And so this sets the .NET version. This task will do a .NET restore on your project, because at this point you've got ultimately the code. .NET CLI will then do a build, and so that's each of these. And each of these are special tasks that are defined in Azure DevOps that you have to go look up just basically in the Microsoft documentation or random blog posts to see how they work. And actually, the most frustrating part of Azure DevOps to me so far has been getting a lot of this right. And so that's essentially the build process. Then there's the testing part, which I'm going to comment out for right now. We're going to uncomment this later whenever we create our unit test project and then have it start being a part of the build. And so then I publish the app, I then zip it up into a zip file, and then we deploy it to Azure. That's this last step. And so this really is the entire build pipeline. So it's not too bad. Now there's something in this last step that is required for us to do the actual deployment. Everything else is set up as is. There's 0 changes to be made except here, because I actually have to tell it where to go to do that, where to go to deploy. And so if we're going to deploy it somewhere, we should probably go set up that thing. So let's go back and go to Azure. So let's go create a resource. We're going to create a web app. Let's create a new resource group. It's going to be the dog money resource group. I bet this web app name is not taken yet. Boom. All right. So dogmoney.azurewebsites.net is where this will show up. What kind of app is it? .NET 5. We'll run it on Windows. We're going to do the free tier. Everything else is good. Create. All right, so this is going to create, and when this create the Azure web app, and when this is done, we can take some value from here and start setting something up. And so while that's going, which won't take very long, what you have in this last step is you need ultimately 2 things. One, you need the app name, which is dog money because we just created it. And then what you do is you have to create a connection between your project in Azure DevOps and your web app in the portal, which is actually really easy to do if you know where to go. and I will show you. So now we have this done. So let's go to the resource. Here we are. Dog money is ready to go. What do we see on the website? Nothing, because we haven't hooked up our code yet. So this is just the default page. So what's the app name? We know it is Dog Money. So now let's go create our connection. And so like I said, the connection is for connecting your Azure DevOps project to the Azure web app we just created. And so we're now back in the Dog Money project. You create connections in the project settings. You go down and you go to service connections. So we're going to create one to an Azure Resource Manager. This is, I'm signed in as, as myself. I'm just going to use the subscription that I have to do this, and we'll call it the Dog Money Azure Connection is what we will call it. And this is the name we will actually use in our configuration. I do have to pick which resource group, and I will pick the Dog Money resource group, and that will be done. And so while that's setting up that connection, I'm going to go here and replace that there. So now our deployment section in our Azure pipelines is actually set up. And so we can go back to pipelines. All right, so we're ready to go. So let's get this code, because I just put this file within my repo. And push that on up. So if we go to our repos, we can see the Azure pipelines there in the root, which means if we go to pipelines, this now becomes super easy. So I'm going to create a pipeline. Our code's in Azure. We're going to use the Dog Money repo, and now we can see that it pulled our custom Azure pipelines config.
Hey, Eric.
Yes, sir.
Somebody asked if we will be sharing this code afterwards. Are you going to upload this to our repo or anything?
Tell you what I'll do, because the only code here is the pipeline YAML file. I'll put that in a gist or something. I'll put a link on the website. Does that work?
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, because it would be annoying to type all this out. I totally get that. That is a good plan. Okay, so we have this. Now let's hit run and let's see it do its magic. Now, in theory, if I did everything correctly, what'll happen is this will actually get deployed all the way out to production. We'll see it here in a minute. But let's actually start watching the process. And so what we've done is that we've kicked off the job. And view this as, so here's the Dog Money project. This is this particular build that's going on right here. If we want to see it go step by step, we just click into here. And first thing it's doing is it's basically getting set up. And as soon as it actually reads the pipelines file, what it will do is it'll fill out all of our steps. And so there they are. And so now it's going to walk through all of those. And sometimes some of these steps will take 20 seconds. And then sometimes those same steps will take a minute and a half, which means right now is a great time to talk about anything. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask them if you have.
Yeah, hi. I had a question over here. So in Azure DevOps, the way I see it is you get a temporary machine for actually executing all these commands. So if I were to compare it with Jenkins, say if we were running Jenkins on a VM, so let's say you deploy this the zip file into Azure App Service for QA, and then you want to actually send it over the pipeline. You want to give a manual approval and push it to production. So how does that work? Like how is the zip file retained between various environments? Because I could be pushing to production 15 days later or 10 days later, right?
Sure. That is not something I've done, but the basic answer is this. You can store build assets in the artifacts. You can store the build there. And Azure Pipelines does have the ability to set up a release pipeline with manual, what's the word? Manual OK. And so it can stop in a particular environment. Somebody has to come and manually say push. And so it does certainly support it. I've never done it though, so I can't really speak to it, but it is certainly supported.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. All right, we are still waiting. As we can see, the use .NET Core SDK took 1 minute and 14 seconds. That's our longest one this particular round.
What is the significance of the YAML file, the pipeline file?
Good question. Could you mute yourself? I'm getting an echo. The YAML file for Azure Pipelines basically defines the DevOps flow. All right. It is basically instructions. All right. What you can do in Azure DevOps is you can come through the UI and you can set up various steps in the UI for building out your build pipeline. Or what you can do is put that in source control in an Azure Pipelines YAML file. And so that's really all it is. It's two different ways of specifying all of your steps. Like I want to do this first, and then this next, and then this next, and so forth. And so it's just a source file based way of specifying your flow. But if you don't like that, you can go with the UI version of it as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, right. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, the job finished. And so at this point, we can go and look at particular steps if we really wanted to. Apparently, this is deployed, so we can go check that. Okay, so here is our dog money application now deployed to production. You can send it to all of your friends. I can guarantee that it will stay running at least another hour and a half. Okay, so we've got this deployed. Let's see, that means we can go back to our boards and say, oh, you know what we did? We forgot to put it in doing, which is pretty terrible. And so let's go ahead and put it in done. Now that it's done, let's go ahead and check our dashboard. And now we have one thing that's not done and 3 things that are completed, which is cool. Now, since we've done a build, now I can actually add something else to the dashboard. I can come in here and pull in the build history. And let's see, let's configure that. It's going to ask what build pipeline. I only have one build pipeline, and you can have multiple, obviously. I only have that one, and we can see that that one build was a smashing success, and that it ran for 3 minutes and 25 seconds. And so there we've added a little bit more to our dashboard. So if we go back to our board so we can figure out what we're supposed to do next. Next, what we need to do is we need to set up the unit tests. All right, and so that's going to involve 2 steps. We need to create the unit test project because we don't have one right now. And then we need to uncomment that section in the build and then see if that actually works. So let's go create that unit testing project. So I'm going to create that project right here. New project. I will use XUnit, not because I particularly favor it, but just because it sounds like fun. Dogmoney.tests. And this is not going to be a particularly robust test. It's just going to be testing the CI/CD pipeline. That is really the only purpose of this. And so here I have this basic test. And if we look here in the solution, what we need to do is we need to add a dependency. So add a project reference between this and Dog Money, the website. And let me pin that there. All right, in dog money, I'm going to go and create a class number generator. Obviously, it's going to return 42. All right, so this very important class, we're going to create a unit test for, specifically for this function. So here in, not there, in unit test, we can say number generator dot, give me a number. And so this will give us that number. Well, let's do an assertion. So assert equal, what are we expecting back? We're expecting a, let's get a failing test first. So here we have a very simple unit test just to verify that really this thing just works. So let's go ahead and run the tests. All right. It did in fact fail, which was what it was supposed to do. Cool. Change it to 42. Now we should be able to run it and it should pass. It does. Okay, so we have a basic, if not lame, unit test set up. The other thing that we're going to need is we're going to need this, because otherwise it's not going to run a test. What this does is it runs just runs essentially a .NET test, exactly what you would run on the, at the terminal. And it's going to collect some code coverage, which we'll take a look at. And that's really all we got to do. So let's get all that going. But before we do that, just so we can see something deployed differently on the website, let's go here and change this to dog money. We made a test. All right, so let's go see if we can get this deployed. So let's go see what's changed. We added our test number generator. We did change the solution file because we added the project. We changed that index.cshtml, and we did change the Azure Pipelines files. So all of that is correct. Let's see, added unit tests. Okay, so now that we've pushed that, I do expect whenever we get to Azure DevOps for that pipeline to already be running. And so we can see it here on the upper level of all the pipelines for dog money, added unit tests. So if we dig in, we can see that that particular run is going right now. We can see the previous run, that it was a success and how long it took and how long ago it was. And by the way, this also does send build emails. I just don't have my email open, so we're not seeing them, but it does send those as well. So let's go in and take a look at the unit tests and the job. And now we are back here to this very long process where it goes and builds things. Last time, the .NET Core thing took over a minute though. So this time it's going faster. But while it's going, if anyone has a question, feel free to ask. I do see a question of how do you create a pipeline for different environments, dev and QA. So one thing you can do is you can go into the pipelines area. We can come back to this in a second. And you can create a new pipeline. And it can have a different configuration. And so this part, if you want to have them different for dev and QA, it actually might be easier to do that through the UI. Or what you could do, for example, is you could create another pipeline. So let's say you have a particular branch that you have all your code in, that you're going to deploy this to a particular environment for a while. in that branch, if you want to, you could actually have an Azure pipeline YAML, and you can have a pipeline running off of that specific branch. And so it can have rules, different rules, even within the Azure pipelines. And so I think you've got some different options there. I myself haven't set up anything in Azure DevOps for multiple environments though, but I know that's at least some ways that you can do it. Any other questions or thoughts? All right, here we are. We do have the .NET test. Everything looks fine here. We'll also see this further up because you can't actually see the results. So if we back up a little bit and we go to edit unit test, now we can go in and we can see our test results. And so we can see here we had 1 passed, 0 failed. All's good. Hooray, no test failures down there at the bottom. And so we've got our test. Now let's fail it and see this break. So let's go to our unit test. Oh, better, let's change our number generator. Is now going to fail. All right, that's now pushed, which of course will cause another build. So if we go back up here, well, not that far, maybe a bug. And so now that's running. And so while that's going, we can go back here and take a look at this. We can see actually now that the code coverage is available. And so that was a part of the run in the Azure Pipelines file. So we can click on that. I'm not a big code coverage guy, but if you're interested in this kind of stuff, this is available for you. And so you can see that those statistics for that right there. All right, back up, and then let's go take a look at this one. And so the job is still running. We're 30 seconds in, and it's gotten past the .NET Core SDK. Now, I expect what we'll see here when it hits .NET Test will be red, and then it will skip all of this other stuff because it's not going to deploy if your tests fail. But we're not yet. We're not there yet because it's being slow. Like I said earlier, I don't know if everybody's here. I'm not normally a DevOps guy. Working on DevOps and debugging configuration files is a whole lot of time of make a change and then walk away for 2 or 3 minutes and then come back and see if it worked. So it's sometimes seems to have a rather long feedback loop. I hear this is normal. Any questions, thoughts? Or we just wait awkwardly?
The latter.
Yeah, I have no reference to compare this to, not being a DevOps guy. So, other DevOps people may look at this and go, "Wow, this is really terrible." But for me, since I have no experience, it's not so bad. Okay, looks like we did get our error in our .NET test. Let's go take a look at it. All right, all is bad. Well, it's all good because we wanted that to happen. So if we back up a little bit, we can see if we go in here, you can also see in the Azure DevOps UI what's going on with the test. And so if you want to dig in at this point, you can go in and see the actual errors if that's something you're interested in doing. And then, of course, all the other information. Now, let's go take a look at our dashboards because we set up our dashboards to show builds. And so we can see we had our successful build, which took over 3 minutes, then another successful when our unit test passed, and then a candy cane build, a failure build, here whenever we just failed that. And so I would say things are going poorly because we have a failed unit test. So we can feel heroic. Let's go fix it and get this all done. All right, we made a change. A build got kicked off. You know what? I never did a refresh after we did that push earlier with the UI changes. I think I did that before the failed build. I did, and so there are those changes. So those did make it. Anyway, so here is our last job, and I think going to be our last wait time. Since we're waiting again, any other questions, thoughts?
Does Azure DevOps allow you to edit the file to repo?
Could you say that again? There's hard for you to tell. Yeah, it does. And I've hooked up a GitHub repo to this. It's really no harder to do. You just have to authorize GitHub, and you get that I've not seen any real advantages to actually storing the files in Azure DevOps repos at this point. I just did it because this is a demoing part of Azure DevOps. I have no complaints about the repos in Azure DevOps. They've been fine for me so far, but it's certainly not a requirement.
Eric, a question.
Yep.
Is there any chance that maybe the classic editor would go away or something? Because it kind of goes back, it's sort of, if you want to use it, they will link.
So the question is the classic editor, the web UI going to go away? That's the question, right?
Yes.
Okay, I have not heard that at all, but I am no expert on this, and so I am the wrong person to ask. I do not know. All right, we're almost done with this process. The restore this time took the longest bit. And as someone mentioned earlier, every time this job runs, you've got this new agent that wakes up clean, has to re-download everything, which is exactly what you want. It does make it a little slower, but and so it's just going to be inconsistent in terms of its timing. So it's publishing, it's zipping up, and now it's deploying. And at this point, assuming this works, and it did, we will be able to go to our boards. And look, we forgot to put it in doing. Fail. Go to our board and move it to done. Then we can go to our dashboard and see that we have no not done issues. I should have just said incomplete issues. That would have made a lot more sense. And 4 completed issues, and here's our last build. So it is green right after that failure, which is handy, and I have no more work assigned to me. All right. That's everything I planned on showing you guys tonight. So not a long meeting. Now we've got a question. Let me answer that. You mentioned that you struggled a lot to get the YAML file, are there any links you want to share? Honestly, the answer is no. Here has been my experience, and this is my experience with other Microsoft projects. Microsoft will often change things very quickly, and what you will often find is various different versions of slightly different things all over the internet. And so you try them and they don't work because, oh, that was for one version back. And so I've had that problems a lot with .NET Core. So that's happened a number of times. And if you've done a lot of .NET Core and gone through several versions, you've probably noticed that. You always have to look at the date on things. So that really has been my struggle with Azure DevOps, because it is changing a whole lot. And so, I've seen that what I've looked for is I look on YouTube and I find things that are recent. I try to only look at videos that have been done in the last few months. You can also find some good stuff on Pluralsight, but some of that stuff is older. And so just do a search and look for recent things. And it's the same way with MVC, right? Or any of the projects that Microsoft is really putting through really fast cycles of development. Look for things and then check the dates. And if it's 2 years old, don't look at it. Just go ahead and look for something else. And so I have not found a good consistent source. Now, the Microsoft documentation itself is not wrong, but I don't find it super helpful for things. And so I generally get a lot more benefit out of watching people's YouTube videos and blog posts, as long as they're not too old. And so no good answer for you there. But yeah, and if you go watch videos that are older, you'll see the UI changes as well. And so it's not just the commands, it is the UI changing as well. So it's trying to figure that stuff out. And also, I don't think the documentation is fantastic. And so all of those things as a whole have made this a little bit difficult for me. Now, it might be because I'm not that used to DevOps, but I don't think so. This isn't that complicated of a thing itself conceptually. So that's my only hint. Search around and pick recent stuff. How do you speed up the pipeline jobs? Now, I can only tell you something I've heard, because I have really yet to deal with Azure artifacts. I believe what you can do is you can use Azure artifacts to speed up some of the restore process and whatnot, because you can store some of the npm and NuGet stuff in there, but I actually don't know for sure if that will do it. And so I can't really give you an answer because I don't know. Good question though. Most of my time, all my time in Azure DevOps pretty much so far has been in pipelines and repos and boards. That's where I spend my time. I'm out of questions that I can see. Okay, well then I'm going to stop sharing. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to hang around for a few more minutes. If you do have any questions that you didn't ask just a few minutes ago, feel free to ask me at that point. This video is up on YouTube as of, I guess, right now, because it is streaming, as Russell said earlier. It's there for you. I'm going to go ahead and plop this file, this Azure Pipeline YAML on a gist or something, and we'll get that link out there, and that'll be out there probably in the next 30 minutes or so. And so if you want this YAML file, do note if you build this on, for example, on Linux, then the zipping part of this might be a little bit different. But so this is done specifically for a Windows build, but most of this stuff should be the same generally across the board. So thanks for coming. Next month we have, I believe, Tim Rayburn is going to come give us a talk on what's new in C# 9. And so I'm looking forward to that. And thanks everyone for coming.
All right, YouTube guys, thanks for hanging out and watching this with us and going through this. Everything will be here. I'll pin the relevant stuff for you. And if you guys anything, just post it in the comments. All right, take it easy.